Stories, Funny Bones by Janet and Alan Alberg. This is how the story begins. On a dark, dark hill, there was a dark, dark town. And in the dark, dark town, there was a dark, dark street. And in the dark, dark street, there was a dark, dark house. And in the dark, dark house, there was a dark, dark staircase. And down the dark, dark staircase, there was a dark, dark cellar. And in the dark, dark cellar, some skeletons lived. There was a big skeleton, a little skeleton, and a dog skeleton. "What shall we do tonight?" said the big skeleton, sitting up in bed as he scratched his skull. "Let's take the dog for a walk," said the little skeleton, "and frighten somebody." "Good idea," said the big skeleton. So the big skeleton, the little skeleton, and the dog skeleton left the dark, dark cellar and climbed the dark, dark staircase and stepped out into the dark, dark street. They walked past the houses and the shops and the police station, and they went to the park. The big skeleton scratched his skull. "What shall we do now?" he said. "Let's play on the swings," said the little skeleton, "and throw a stick for the dog, and frighten somebody." "Good idea," said the big skeleton. So the big skeleton, the little skeleton, and the dog skeleton walked round the dark, dark pond, past the dark, dark tennis courts, and up to the dark, dark swings. The big skeleton and the little skeleton played on the swings, and they threw a stick for their dog. Suddenly, something happened. The dog skeleton chased the stick, tripped over a park bench, and bumped into a tree, and ended up as a little pile of bones. "Look at that," the big skeleton said. "He's all come to pieces. What shall we do now?" "Let's put him back together again," the little skeleton said. So the big skeleton and the little skeleton put the dog skeleton together again, and they sang a song while they did it. "The toe bone's connected to the foot bone, the foot bone's connected to the leg bone, and the leg bone's connected to the hip bone, and the hip bone's connected to the backbone." They got a bit mixed up. "Is that a toe bone? And where does this one go?" When they had finished, the big skeleton said, "The dog looks a bit funny to me." "So he does," said the little skeleton. "We've got his tail on the wrong end. And his head, oh dear, I think it's on backwards." At last, the dog was properly put back together again, and the big skeleton and the little skeleton sang another song. These bones, can bark again, can run around in the park again, can frighten people in the dark again. The big skeleton scratched his skull. That reminds me, he said. We forgot to frighten somebody. Let's do it on the way home then, said the little skeleton. Good idea, the big skeleton said. Oh, I wish we had a nice little boy to frighten. I wish we had a nice little old lady. So the big skeleton, the little skeleton, and the dog skeleton left the dark, dark swings and went out into the dark, dark town and tried to frighten somebody. The trouble was, there wasn't anybody. Everybody was tucked up in their bed. Even the policemen in the police station were in bed, and even the animals in the zoo. Of course, the skeleton animals were awake. Let's have a ride on the elephant skeleton, the little skeleton said. Let's have a word with the parrot skeleton. The big skeleton scratched his skull. Let's keep out of the way of the crocodile skeleton, he said. When they were back in the street and they still couldn't find anybody to frighten, the big skeleton said, what shall we do now? The little skeleton scratched his skull. Let's frighten each other. That's better than nothing. That's a very good idea, the big skeleton said. So, after the big skeleton frightened the little skeleton frightened the big skeleton, and then the big and the little skeleton frightened the dog skeleton, and the dog skeleton frightened them both. Woof! Corners and they frightened each other. They climbed up lampposts and they frightened each other. They jumped out of dustbins and they frightened each other all the way home. And that is how the story ends. On a dark, dark hill, there was a dark, dark town. And in the dark, dark town, there was a dark, dark street. And in the dark, dark street, there was a dark, dark house. And in the dark, dark house, there was a dark, dark staircase. And down the dark, dark staircase, there was a dark, dark cellar. In the dark, dark cellar, some skeletons lived. And they still do. The end.